All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started then. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Eviction Data Dashboard, Turning Insight into Action. My name is Hannah McCarty. I'm a Policy and Advocacy Analyst at Kentucky Youth Advocates. Eviction is a critical issue impacting many families, but finding updated data on this issue can be challenging, especially in Kentucky. So we are so excited to launch the Eviction Data Dashboard, which is an interactive tool displaying eviction filings and trends across 120 counties, as well as 138 legislative districts to better understand the scope and impact of eviction across the Commonwealth. So just a little kind of preview of what we will be talking about today. We will start off today with a little bit of background about the issue of eviction and how it impacts kids and families before we do an overview of the dashboard and its key features. We are also joined by two guests today, Talia Hamilton, as well as Representative Susan Whitten. Representative Whitten is joining us as the co-chair of the Kentucky Housing Task Force to talk about housing need in Kentucky and legislation to make common sense changes to Kentucky's eviction process. Representative Whitten, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you if there's anything you want to add.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah. I'm just excited to be here. I'm honored that you would give me a chance to talk and be a part of the webinar, and I'm just excited about this dashboard. Obviously, the eviction expungement bill is something that I'm really going to fight hard for this coming session, and I'm excited that it's something that we can work together on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're so happy to have you here. I know Talia is also joining. She has a little bit of a delay, so will be joining us soon, but she is a housing policy ambassador from Paducah who will be joining to share her thoughts on the data and provide some thoughts on how advocates can use this information to talk to their legislators. So thank you both for joining, and thank you everyone for joining today. We're excited to see such a kind of wider range of backgrounds on the call today. I know we have some folks from the media, metro government, healthcare, as well as housing, all joining to learn about this important issue. So just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Please stay muted during the presentation, but please feel free to drop any questions or comments in the chat, and we will try to answer them as we go. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording as well as a copy of the slides following the webinar. So we will go ahead and jump in. Sorry about that. All right, so a little just background on this issue. So Kentucky has a severe housing supply shortage of over 200,000 units of housing. This includes both for sale and rental units. It's an issue that's affecting every county and income level in Kentucky. And really, the rising cost and availability of housing has made finding and staying in safe, affordable housing difficult for many Kentuckians. In fact, 45% of Kentucky renters live in cost-burdened households, spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And when families are spending more than 30% of their income on housing and housing costs, they are at a higher risk of falling behind on rent, and they are often just one missed paycheck, one family emergency, one car breakdown from falling behind on rent, and they're put at a higher risk of eviction. So what is eviction? Eviction, also referred to as a forcible detainer, is the legal process of removing a tenant from a rental property. Evictions are common and can happen for a variety of reasons, including non-payment of rent or a lease violation. There are also multiple steps of the legal process of eviction, and you can find more information about this on our data dashboard. But the process is initiated when a landlord files an eviction lawsuit with the court against a tenant to remove them from the property. And that process is called an eviction filing. So an eviction record is created the moment a landlord files a claim for eviction with the court. And even if the case is dismissed, the tenant has a mark on their housing record, which can be viewed by any prospective landlord when applying for future housing. So regardless of the outcome of this case, they have an eviction on their record, even if it's dismissed, even if the landlord and the tenant are able to come to an agreement before this process, that is on their record permanently. So what is the impact of eviction? So eviction causes a family to lose their home and often their belongings as well. This picture here is of kind of one of the typical set out of when an eviction warrant is served and a family's items are removed from the house. Families are often forced to move away from their neighborhood. So from their neighborhood, their school and support system. So parents are often, displaced farther away from work. Kids also often have to switch schools or maybe school districts or are located significantly farther from their from where they attend school. Eviction also increases the likelihood of job loss and is associated with reduced earnings. It is also associated with homelessness and housing instability. So families with an eviction record tend to encounter long-term barriers to securing stable housing. Landlords often screen any prospective tenant when looking for housing and will often turn away any applicant with an eviction on their housing record, regardless of the outcome, because they're just seeing that eviction record. So even if a family has a dismissed eviction on their case, they regularly experience housing instability, homelessness, or unsafe housing. Eviction is also linked to negative physical and mental health impacts on both kids and families. So, perfect. So who is impacted by eviction? Families with children are, in fact, 2 times more likely to be evicted than other households. And in fact, the presence of a child in the household actually increases the likelihood that that household will face an eviction. National studies have even found that the most common age to experience eviction in the US is during childhood. And 10% of children under the age of 5 living in rental housing are threatened with eviction each year, and more than 5% are evicted. In Kentucky, we're seeing that this aligns with these trends align with what we're seeing in Kentucky as well, where the average family facing eviction in Kentucky has at least one child in the household. Black renters are also disproportionately impacted by eviction. And annually, 27% of Black children under 5 living in rental households face eviction each year. So impact on kids. So when parents face eviction, kids are deeply impacted. Children in households facing eviction experience challenges to their educational attainment. They're more likely to have to switch schools or school districts. It's also associated with increased absences and lost instruction time. Eviction also puts kids at a risk of negative health outcomes, developmental delays, and toxic stress associated with adverse childhood experiences, or also known as ACEs. Minors are also sometimes named on eviction filings. So individuals under 18 cannot legally sign a lease in Kentucky, yet sometimes children are in a household facing eviction are listed on that eviction filing. This results in children having an eviction record before they are even old enough to sign a lease, which contributes to long-term housing barriers in the future. So that's a little bit of background on just the issue of eviction and how it's an issue that impacts kids and families. I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Lauren Bowling, to introduce herself and to walk us through some of the key features of this dashboard.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lauren. I am a data and research analyst here at Kentucky Youth Advocates. And let's see here, technology cooperating, and I will share this dashboard with you here. Can everybody see? Okay, we got some dots. Okay, awesome. So basically, you'll find a lot of the information that Hannah just went over in various parts on the dashboard. But up here is our brief introduction about what's going on in Kentucky and along with some of the national data that we discussed earlier. It's broken up into several different portions here. We've got the legislative district profiles, the Eviction 101, which gets a little bit more in depth into what happens during an eviction and the different aspects of the process, what's specifically going on in Kentucky, some of the factors that we know contribute to eviction filings, some policy solutions that we're looking at putting forward this year, and then the sources is where we found all of this information. So we'll scroll down here a little bit to our first portion, which is the eviction data profiles for the House and Senate districts. So, and if you don't know what House or Senate district you live in, which that's totally fair, there's a link here. You can go ahead and look it up and you can pop your address in there and it'll give you which districts you live in. If you'd like to download any of this portion right here, there's a little button right here for you to do that. So we'll go ahead and pop it over to House District 2. And what you'll see here is about 23% of the housing units in House District 2 are owned or are occupied by renters. There's some more information down here that we discussed earlier with Hannah, but it's a nice little reminder so that when it prints out, you'll still have that. The other issue here is that we've got a look at the average yearly dismissals and the average yearly judgments. So for House District 2, 78% of those filings resulted in a judgment, which were 343 filings, and then 22% resulted in a dismissal, which was about 94. And then the average yearly filings were 437. This basically indicates over the past 3 years an average. This is not specifically year by year. There we go. Again, we have some more information on the impact on children, and then some sources for this specific that will, all of this will print out on that particular PDF. Okay. So coming down to Eviction 101, there's a lot of really good information here that I would invite you to go through. I'm not going to read it to you because I know you all can read. But again, some of it was covered by Hannah. We've got who is impacted by evictions. A lot of this is national data because they haven't been able to dig down completely into the state data yet. The impact of evictions, again, also got hyperlinks to all of the sources. And then something that is important is an informal eviction, which is basically one that does not go through the court system. These are incredibly hard to track because no paperwork is ever filed. So keep in mind that while we don't have information on this, we suspect that there are quite a few out there that we just don't hear about. Okay. So if you want to look up evictions in your county, we have the ability to do that here. We have the number of filings, the dismissals, and the judgments. And some of the key things that are interesting here is that you'll notice that there are some places, the more populous counties have a lot more filings, which, you know, there's not a really great way to make a map that looks good with that happening here, but Jefferson and Fayette, or where did it go? There it is, are some of the more populous counties. So they're going to have a whole lot of cases filed compared to some of the less populous counties. The dismissals, if you'll notice, most of this is on the lighter end of the spectrum, meaning that fewer percentage of these cases are actually dismissed. And then on the judgment side of things, this means that a lot of these cases make their way through the court system and end up in a judgment either for the tenant or for the landlord. Our statewide eviction trends give us basically a look at over the past 3 years, how many cases were filed per month. You can scroll over these to get exact numbers. And then there's a nice little piece here about legal representation in eviction court. And unfortunately, tenants facing an eviction in Kentucky are not guaranteed the right to an attorney. There are some areas that do have that, which show, impressive results, especially for the children involved. And so there are some really interesting findings here in this Results for America link. And as you can see, for the past 3 years, for the entire state, basically ruled in favor of the tenant, there were 249 cases, and for the landlord, there was over 48,000 cases, excuse me. Okay. So if we go down here, some of the contributing factors, which we've been able to find out through research, housing affordability, utility costs, the housing supply, and unemployment. All of these probably make intuitive sense. And you can learn through as to why some of these things happen through here and then through the sources below. Let's see here. And then here we have some policy solutions, which somebody else will go through who knows more than I do about these. And then our sources are down here at the bottom. There are hyperlinks to all of these. And if you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to either me or, well, info@kyyouth.org. And we do have a lot more data that is available that we just were not able to fit on this dashboard. So feel free to reach out with any questions. I will go ahead and turn it back over to Hannah.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate that background. I see there's already a couple of data questions, so we'll be responding to those as we go. Lauren, I don't know if you mentioned this, but where is this data from? Like, what was that process of?
Thank you. We actually put in a data request with the Administrative Office of the Courts for the past 3 years of filings, dismissals, and judgments for each county in Kentucky and then for statewide. And they provided us with an incredibly nice report that went into all of that detail. And then we did the data analysis for all of the information that we put up.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for that. And as you all can see, I believe Jamie dropped that link in the chat. If you want to go ahead and explore that dashboard and look up your district and kind of look at some of those numbers as well. So I will then pass it on to Representative Whitten. If you want to go ahead and share any thoughts on kind of this work and talk a little bit about your work with the Housing Task Force.
Sure. Thank you, Hannah. I love this dashboard. It's fantastic. When you all sent me my house district profile, especially when I see it compared to another district, it's pretty fascinating. When I see that my dismissals in my district are 72%, which is actually inverted from the district that we looked at. So you know, I will be sharing this with other legislators, selfishly for them to support my bill because I think for me, 72% are subject to dismissals in my district. 36% of my district are renters. So it's a large percentage of renters. Large majority are going to be affected by this bill, and I don't think that I'm alone. I think that there are a lot of districts that will, especially in the larger Louisville, Lexington area, that are going to reflect mine. So I'm just thrilled that you all have provided this information. On the Housing Task Force, we have tried to really dive in. This is year 2 of the Housing Task Force. The first year, we really wanted to identify and get our arms around exactly what the problem was, confirm that it was a statewide problem, because obviously a lot of times when you talk about housing, there is some state and local friction on what is the state's responsibility and then what is local government's responsibility. But I think we've made a pretty good case that this is an issue that does need to be in some way supported by state government because Hannah, as you had said earlier, it affects all 120 counties. It affects urban, rural, suburban. There is no area in our state that is not hurting from this, both availability of housing units and the affordability of housing units. So we're looking at that. We finished our last informational housing task force at the end of October, and we're trying to compile all of that information. And our November task force is going to be presenting our recommendations. And so we have a lot to go through and a lot of things to assess on what we want to recommend. So much of what we're going to recommend are on the supply side, because it is pretty obvious that our issue is lack of supply, both just units as well as the affordability. So we're going to run through that. This eviction expungement is kind of the one kind of exception that it does not deal with supply, but as you all will talk about, it's so important to make sure that we don't put up unnecessary barriers for Kentuckians, and especially Kentuckians with small children, to have access to affordable housing. And so by expunging, by removing, especially you know uh, these are um, times where the filings have been dismissed. So, this has been really narrowly crafted to not burden the landlord in any way. They have every right to, if they are owed past rent or anything like that, they still have that ability to do so. This just removes really the ability for these Kentucky families to get housing in the future. So we've had really good success. We presented at the judiciary a couple weeks ago, the interim judiciary committee, and there was some good conversation, but by and large, I've got tons of support from my fellow legislators. So I'm excited about that everyone kind of understands that this is something that needs to be passed this coming session, and I'm going to really hit the ground running on this. I'm going to file it on day one, and even before session starts, I'm going to be talking to the committee chairs to try to get a hearing early, because as most of you all know, if you've been in Frankfurt at all, once, especially a long session, once this session starts going, it can take some wild turns. And can go off the rails a little bit. So I'm going to try. I'm really focusing on getting this heard early, and I have just really good feedback, and I really think that we're gonna see it move through this year, and especially with support like Kentucky Youth Advocates and other organizations that have committed to supporting this legislation. I'm encouraged.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Representative Whitten. It is so nice to hear that perspective, and just very grateful for your leadership and advocacy on this important issue. And this is going to be our year.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I do. I think that as I said earlier, it's that this has taken countless hours, from um, many other organizations, collaboration, and everyone involved has really narrowly crafted this so that it does what it's intended, that there will not be, we don't think, unintended consequences, which is always the fear when you pass a bill to think, okay, what is the one scenario that we didn't think about that people are gonna find. But we really think that we've walked through it and have vetted it, and so we're really proud of the language, and we really think that it's just good legislation that needs to pass this year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Before we transition into our final guest, I did just want to take a second. I know a couple people have put questions in the chat. Thank you for those. Please feel to keep them coming. If anyone, I know we've been talking for a couple minutes now. If anyone has any kind of burning questions that they would like to come off mute to ask, we can get to some of those before we spotlight Talia. I know that there are a couple of questions. Some of these are more data, and I'm definitely going to defer to Lauren on that. But I saw that Sarah Ladd asked about the point of children being in the home being a risk factor for eviction. Asked if we could kind of expand on that a little bit. I see that Lauren noted that that's something that they haven't identified any kind of causal factors as to why that is. But I do know there's a lot of kind of research looking into this issue right now. Thank you, of course, for linking the Eviction Lab, which is such a great source for national data about this issue. I think that is something that's still being determined, but I think just some initial kind of explanations are thought to be just general financial strain. Families are more likely to be in a position where they might fall behind on rent just because of the cost of many costs that families face, as well as I think there's kind of thought to be it's a kind of a higher more of a liability for landlords. Children are younger, as they're developing and they're, sent, especially around maintaining certain things around actual property. Children can also be, a handful at times. And so I think that's kind of viewed as more of a strain for landlords as well. But those are just kind of a couple of things that the research suggests, but they are still kind of in the process of figuring out why exactly families are at a higher risk. Um, Wonderful. Well, feel free to keep adding some of those comments in and questions in the chat. It looks like Talia just messaged me, and it looks like I'm not sure she's going to be able to join today. Looks like um, life has happened, and she's had a bit of a delay. I will go ahead and kind of talk about some of these next steps, and before we wrap up. All right. All right, everyone. Looks like my screen is not cooperating. Made it so far. It's two. All right. Go to the end. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Representative Whitten, it was so nice to have you here. And we're really grateful and excited to see what will happen in 2026. We appreciate all of you all joining today and taking time out of your busy schedules to learn about this important issue. We definitely just want to encourage you to stay involved and to take action. Oh, impact on kids. Perfect. Wrong slide. Sorry, everyone. There we go. There is that final link to the eviction data dashboard. I'm sure it's in the chat, but we hope that you all find this helpful as you engage in your advocacy and learn more about what can be done both on the state and county level to prevent the harmful impacts of eviction on kids and families. Just some ways that you can take action are definitely, we want to encourage you to reach out to your state legislator, ask them to support making common sense changes to Kentucky's eviction process to reduce the harmful impacts of eviction on Kentucky's kids and families. You can visit Kentucky KYA's advocacy page for more information on contacting your legislator. You can also stay up to date on meetings and efforts of the Kentucky Housing Task Force, which will continue meeting monthly through December. And if you are interested in bringing an advocacy training to your organization, there's more information about that on the KYA advocacy page as well. We definitely want to encourage you to get involved in the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children. And don't forget to register for our upcoming Blueprint Summit, which will be held on December 4th in Shelbyville. So register today. And lastly, if you're not yet subscribed, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter for any policy updates. That is everything we have for you all today. I'm sorry Talia wasn't able to join, but we can drop some of her some information about some of her advocacy in the chat as well. And if you're interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out.